Rome didn't build its empire on power. It built it on the stock market. We admire Rome's legions forged through honor and discipline, and its magnificent monuments that still stand today. But behind every glorious column and every shining armor was a staggering cost, and a vast financial chain. Tens of thousands of men needed food and clothing to build structures and fight wars. From horses to slaves, everyone needed sustenance. Every new conquest required weapons and equipment, and all of it, in the end, came down to one thing: money. More money than you can possibly imagine. So, who financed all this glory and bloodshed? And why is it still relevant enough to affect today's global economy? For Rome, war was essential. Strange, right? If war was so expensive, why keep fighting? Let me explain. War wasn't only fought on the battlefield. War was a necessity to keep the economic gears turning. Once those gears started moving, stopping them would cause even greater collapse. A small community grew by fighting, and as it grew, it had to keep fighting. Becoming an empire wasn't a choice anymore. It became a financial necessity. Sounds familiar? Let's go back to the beginning. In its early years, Rome was a state of its people, and the people were its army. If you benefited from the state, you were expected to contribute to it. Everyone brought their own weapons and food, fought, and returned to their land when the war ended. But as Rome's territories expanded, power grew, and with power came the need for more soldiers, more workers, and more food. Campaigns stretched farther away, and the distance made them unsustainable. The old system, grab your weapon and defend our lands, was reaching its end. Rome needed professional soldiers, warriors who had to be compensated for their service. This growing need forced Rome to centralize its economy. The state began paying wages to its workers and soldiers, not much, but enough to keep them marching and loyal. And as those gears turned, new cogs were added. As the costs of conquest and empire grew, new lands became a financing model. Every conquered province meant new taxes, new slaves, new mines, and new farmland. It became a cycle. For the system to stay stable, it needed new income, and new income required new conquests. But as the system evolved, it also grew darker and bloodier. Rome's foundation wasn't only built on taxes or slaves. Debt became one of its greatest pillars. During long and costly wars like the Parthian Wars, Rome borrowed enormous sums from the elites and the rising bourgeois class. These weren't patriotic donations or forced tributes. They were financial investments in a profitable industry, war. And those investors expected returns, interest payments, shares from taxes, and trade privileges in the newly conquered lands. War became like a stock market. The more the elites earned, the more blood was spilled. The more blood was spilled, the richer the elites became. Think of the Roman Empire as a corporation. Sound familiar? This process created a military-centered economy, shaping everything around it. Power no longer belonged to politicians. It shifted to generals who acted like brokers, promising spoils and profits. Senators fed on violence and blood, betting on wars like investors betting on stocks. From logistics to construction, from battles to taxes, everything became a business. This was military-industrial capitalism in a toga. As the empire expanded, so did its needs, and its costs multiplied. To pay soldiers, workers, and creditors, the state constantly needed new sources of revenue. When wars slowed or rebellions drained the treasury, Rome invented a now familiar strategy: devalue the currency to lighten its debt. Starting with Emperor Nero, the silver content in the denarius coin was gradually reduced. Later, emperors continued the practice, and the result? Coins with no real value, empty metal tokens. And that led to inflation. Confidence collapsed, and the empire's financial system began to rot from within. Just like today, even in economic collapse, the rich got richer. Senators and elites protected their wealth through land, slaves, and foreign investments. Meanwhile, the middle and lower classes paid taxes in devalued currency, while the elite shielded themselves through exemptions and backdoor deals. Public services crumbled. Bribery and corruption flourished, and the costs of wars, once seen as investments, were now paid by the poor through inflation, forced labor, and military conscription. This was the beginning of a monetary collapse, and cracks began forming in the military machine that upheld it. Now, I want you to close your eyes and think for a moment. Massive government debts, wars financed by high-interest loans, central banks printing money to maintain stability, a small group profiting from defense contracts and chaos, an economic system that must keep expanding, militarily or financially, just to survive. These mechanisms evolve over centuries, but their DNA stays the same. Systems that feed on blood and debt. Rome's hidden message is clear. A financial system built on aggressive growth will always destroy itself, like a truck speeding downhill with no brakes. When there are no more lands to conquer, no more mines to dig, and no more people left to exploit, the system begins to collapse. Debt compounds, investor expectations go unmet, revenues dry up, and the state starts squeezing the middle and lower classes to keep going. As always, taxes increased. Money supply expanded. The state began surveilling its people more closely and imposing new obligations. And when the people grew restless, Rome distracted them with circuses and games. Sound familiar? Today, we don't call it tribute. We call it taxation. We don't call it slavery. We call it monetary policy. But it's the same system, repackaged with suits and modern names. When elections approach, governments print money through central banks. People spend what they earn, but their money loses value. Governments spend more than they make through new loans and deals. The rich grow wealthier. The poor watch their paper money lose value every day. Behind every war, there's still an industry and a debt machine. The U.S., for example, spent over $2 trillion on a war it eventually abandoned, most of it financed by debt, or, as we politely call it, investment. So who owns that debt? Who gets the contracts? Who controls the natural resources? Who profits from the trade privileges? And most importantly, who pays the price? Think about it for a moment, and the answer becomes obvious. For generations, the financial system has fed on itself, using nations and crises as tools, and discarding them when they've served their purpose. When borrowing becomes routine, you don't even need a crisis to justify inflation. It's just the modernized version of the same bloody cycle. And as the cycle drags on, You go on camera and claim everything is fine until it's not. That's why financial history matters, because on every path from dominance to collapse, money is the constant companion. These aren't bedtime stories to forget. They're warnings. Look closely at Rome, and beyond the grand empire, you'll see this. A state that empowered private capital became addicted to expansion, deliberately devalued its currency, and impoverished its citizens, not because it was evil, but because the system, once set in motion, couldn't stop without destroying itself. Now look at today. Do you see a modern Roman Empire? Digital, global, powered by financial markets instead of legions. The game is the same. Only the arena has changed. Money still controls debt, and debt still controls power. Wars are still profitable, even if they're fought with algorithms instead of swords. Inflation still crushes the middle and lower classes, and financial theater still works till the curtain falls. So what can you do? Start by understanding the script, because most people don't. They live by routine, never questioning the system. They think inflation is random. They think taxes are for their comfort. They think debt equals freedom. They think growth can last forever. That's an illusion. You can't completely escape the matrix, but you can learn how it works. Once you know the rules of the game, you move not 1, but 10 steps ahead. You can adjust your moves, not just financially, but mentally. Because in financial markets, mental consistency is worth more than money. That means not only controlling your money, but understanding how money controls power. It means knowing what to do when markets are calm, not just when they're moving. It means asking yourself in silence, when I'm inside this system, who's profiting from it? Because they never taught you this in school. They only trained you to fit the system. They never wanted you to wonder what happens behind wars or conquests. They never wanted you to question why politicians speak the way they do. They wanted you distracted with media, sports, entertainment, not with the rules of money or the flow of power. But now you know. And once you know, you can't unsee it. Financial literacy isn't just saving money in a jar or managing a budget. It's understanding whose power that money represents before and after it enters your hands. It's knowing the trick behind the magician's act. So next time there's a new war, a new stimulus, a new crisis, or a politician giving a speech, don't just watch. Follow the money. Ask who lends, who trades, and who pays the price. Because if history repeats itself in different costumes, it's trying to teach you something. And what's that lesson? Empires don't fall because the enemy breaks their gates. They fall when the math stops making sense, and no one has the courage to fix it. This video, I'm sure, showed you the bloody side of money. If you're starting to think differently, hit like and subscribe, because in the next videos, I'll need sharp, conscious minds, people who can see through the illusion.